For the last 10,000 years, the northernmost edges of our world have held a dark, silent secret. Beneath millions of tons of solid, impenetrable permafrost lies a vault of cosmic proportions. It is a graveyard of giants, a frozen time capsule where the ancient world didn't just die, it was perfectly, terrifyingly preserved. But right now, at this very moment, that vault is cracking wide open. As global temperatures shift and weather anomalies intensify across the globe, the Siberian tundra, the frozen wastes of Alaska, and the jagged Canadian Arctic are doing something they haven't done since the dawn of human civilization. They are melting. They are dissolving into a thick, prehistoric mire. And as this ancient ice turns to mud, it is releasing things that modern science never expected to see in its wildest nightmares. We are not talking about bare fossils. We are not talking about crumbled, mineralized bones or dusty fragments hidden in rock formations. We are talking about prehistoric creatures with their soft tissue, skin, and flesh still entirely intact. We are talking about ancient apex predators with liquid blood still flowing through veins that froze solid 30,000 years ago. We are looking at beasts that look so fresh, so unaltered by the passage of millennia, that they appear to have fallen asleep just yesterday. What happens when the terrifying monsters of the Ice Age suddenly return to the surface of the modern world? What secrets are locked inside their perfectly preserved bodies, waiting to change everything we know about evolutionary biology? And more importantly, what else is waking up alongside them in the deep dark of the thawing earth? Today, we are going deep inside the most shocking, viral, and terrifying wildlife discoveries ever pulled from the melting ice. We will journey from prehistoric apex predators that still look ready to leap up and hunt, to the highly controversial secret laboratories trying to use this flesh to bring extinct species back to life. This is not science fiction, and it is no longer a distant possibility. The Ice Age is waking up right beneath our feet. The world is changing fast, and human civilization will never be the same again. To understand where this unfolding story begins, we must travel to the Yakutia region of Siberia, a place where winter temperatures regularly plunge below -50 degrees Celsius. It is a brutal, unforgiving, and desolate landscape where the ground is frozen solid for miles downward. For centuries, the only people daring enough to dig into this unforgiving frozen earth were local mammoth tusk hunters. These men risked their lives navigating treacherous wilderness, searching for the highly valuable, exposed ivory of extinct woolly mammoths to sell on the global market. But in 2017, a pair of hunters trekking along the muddy, collapsing banks of the isolated Tarktyak River noticed something completely anomalous protruding from a vertical wall of melting permafrost. It wasn't the smooth, curved white ivory of a mammoth. It was fur. It was golden, heavily matted, and impossibly intact fur, clinging to a small body. The hunters had accidentally stumbled upon what biologists now officially call the most perfectly preserved Ice Age carnivore ever discovered in human history. They named her Sparta. Sparta was a cave lion cub, an infant member of a species that hasn't walked the earth for thousands of generations. When team members and paleontologists finally arrived at the site to analyze her body, they fully expected to find a heavily decayed, flattened mummy. Instead, they were left utterly speechless. Sparta had been resting in the deep freeze for 28,000 years. Yet, despite the unimaginable passage of time, her delicate whiskers were still sharp and attached to her snout. Her tiny claws were completely intact. Her skin, her golden fur, and even her internal organs were preserved so perfectly that scientists could perform tests to tell exactly what she had eaten before her life came to a sudden halt. To truly comprehend why this specific discovery sent shockwaves of excitement and fear through the global scientific community, you have to understand what the cave lion actually was. These weren't just ordinary modern lions that happened to live in a colder climate. Panthera spilea was one of the most formidable, ruthless apex predators to ever walk the surface of the earth. They were up to 15% larger than modern African lions, possessed immense bone density, and were built with massive, muscular shoulders designed to bring down heavy reindeer, aggressive bison, and even juvenile woolly mammoths. For thousands of years, modern humans only knew of their existence through crude, stylized cave paintings drawn by our distant ancestors in Europe and Asia. For the first time in human history, we weren't just guessing based on a charcoal drawing or assembling shattered skeletal remains. We were looking directly into the physical face of the prehistoric predator itself. But how exactly did Sparta survive the crushing weight of glaciers and the ravages of time so flawlessly? When international scientists performed a virtual autopsy using advanced, high-resolution CT scans, they solved the dual mystery of her tragic death and her miraculous preservation. Sparta hadn't died of starvation during a harsh winter, nor had she been torn apart by a rival predator. The digital scans revealed severe internal trauma, including broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, and significant skull damage. 28,000 years ago, this tiny, curious cub had likely fallen into a deep, hidden crack in the treacherous ice or was caught in a sudden, violent mudslide. She was instantly buried alive, sealed away from oxygen, scavenging insects, and destructive bacteria. The wet earth around her froze solid within mere hours, creating a natural cryogenic chamber that protected her form until the exact moment she was uncovered by the melting sun. Yet, as spectacular as Sparta was, she was merely the opening act of an unfolding global phenomenon. Just a few miles away from the very spot where the lion cub was found, the melting Siberian tundra yielded an even larger, more imposing resident of the ancient world. Imagine walking through the dense mud of a remote riverbank and coming face to face with a creature that looks like it belongs entirely in a fantasy novel. A beast covered in thick, hazel-colored hair, possessing a massive, lethal horn, and built like an armored military tank. This was the discovery of the Abiyaski woolly rhinoceros. Discovered late in 2020, this adolescent woolly rhino spent somewhere between 34,000 and 50,000 years completely locked away in the permafrost. When it finally thawed out, researchers realized it was over 80% biologically intact. Its heavy hooves, its soft tissues, and its dense winter coat were all there to touch. Even its primary horn, an item made of keratin which usually decomposes rapidly after an animal dies, was found lying right next to its head, perfectly preserved by the cold. Before this incredible discovery, paleontologists had engaged in a massive, decades-long debate regarding how these enormous beasts managed to survive the brutal, sub-zero winds of the ancient Mammoth steppe. Looking at bare, dry bones in a museum could never tell them if the rhinos possessed thick fat layers, or how their protective fur coat was distributed across their massive frames. The Abiyaski rhino answered everything in an instant. It possessed an incredibly dense, multi-layered undercoat that was completely different structurally from any living rhino species found in Africa or Asia today. It also revealed a massive, prominent hump of fat located directly on its neck, used to store vital energy during the catastrophic, dark Arctic winters when food was scarce. But the most incredible part of this discovery wasn't just what was visible on the outside. When paleontologists carefully opened the stomach cavity and examined the contents of the rhino's digestive tract, they found the pristine remains of its very last meal, perfectly preserved twigs, specific grasses, and ancient herbs that no longer grow on Earth. This single discovery gave scientists a perfect snapshot of an ecosystem that completely vanished tens of thousands of years ago. It proved definitively that the Ice Age wasn't just a barren, empty wasteland of snow. It was a vibrant, thriving grassland kept alive by massive herds that trampled the earth and stimulated vegetation. But as these incredible, breathtaking animals are pulled from the earth one after another, a dark, ambitious question begins to echo loudly through the scientific community. If the meat, the fur, and the actual cells of these animals are still this intact, can we use modern technology to bring them back to life? In state-of-the-art laboratories across the globe, a controversial, multi-million-dollar race is officially underway. It is a field known as de-extinction. For decades, the idea of cloning an extinct animal was restricted strictly to Hollywood movies and sci-fi literature. But the pristine quality of the specimens currently coming out of the melting permafrost has changed the rules of genetic science entirely. The true turning point occurred during the complex excavation of a massive, adult female woolly mammoth on a remote Siberian island. When researchers hacked into the frozen, dark meat of the mammoth's lower body, something completely impossible happened. A dark, thick, viscous fluid began to actively ooze out of the white ice. It was liquid blood. Think about the sheer weight of that reality for a moment. This massive animal had been dead and buried for over 10,000 years. The temperature of the ground around it was far below freezing, a state that should turn any liquid into solid ice. Yet, its blood had not coagulated, and it had not frozen solid. When scientists rushed the samples to a lab, they discovered that mammoth blood contained a unique, highly specialized evolutionary adaptation, a natural anti-freeze protein that allowed their hemoglobin to effectively transport oxygen throughout their massive bodies even in near-freezing temperatures. This incredible survival mechanism is the exact reason why their blood remained liquid inside the icy tomb, defying the normal laws of death and decay. This legendary discovery changed everything for geneticists. Suddenly, they weren't just working with degraded, broken, and incomplete DNA fragments found in dry, fossilized bones. They suddenly had direct access to fresh, unblemished tissue. Biotechnology companies are currently using advanced CRISPR gene editing technology to completely map out the mammoth genome down to the very last link. Their ultimate goal isn't necessarily to create a perfect clone from scratch, but to take the living DNA of a modern Asian elephant, which happens to be a 99.6% genetic match to the mammoth, and systematically splice in the ancient genes responsible for thick hair, large fat reserves, and cold-resistant blood. They aren't just undertaking this massive project for scientific vanity or entertainment. Proponents of de-extinction argue that reintroducing these engineered mega herbivores to the Arctic could actually become our greatest weapon against climate change. By trampling down the thick insulating snow, knocking down dark, heat-absorbing trees, and exposing the frozen ground directly to the freezing polar air, massive herds of resurrected mammoths could theoretically prevent the permafrost from melting further. This would trap billions of tons of ancient greenhouse gases safely beneath the earth where they belong. But a growing faction of critics warn that humanity is playing a dangerous game with forces we do not fully understand. We are attempting to forcefully reintroduce an apex herbivore into a modern ecosystem that has spent 10,000 years moving on and evolving without it. And more importantly, the melting ice isn't just releasing majestic, herbivorous giants that we can see and control. It is releasing things that are invisible, ancient, and highly volatile. While paleontologists eagerly look for fur, horns, and bones, virologists are looking at something far smaller, and infinitely more dangerous to the survival of the human race. The permafrost is a perfect preservative for muscle tissue, but it is also a flawless, natural storage vault for deadly pathogens. Viruses and bacteria that have been completely dormant for tens of thousands of years, cut off from the evolutionary changes of the modern world, are beginning to wake up as the sun warms the mud. In 2014, a team of French and Russian scientists made a chilling discovery deep in the Siberian waste. They uncovered a massive, ancient virus buried nearly 100 feet below the surface. It had been frozen solid for 30,000 years. They carefully took the virus back to a highly secure containment lab, slowly warmed it up to room temperature, and watched in absolute disbelief as it instantly became active. It began replicating. It was still highly infectious. They named this prehistoric entity Pithovirus sibericum. Luckily for humanity, this specific virus only targets single-celled amoebas and poses absolutely zero physical threat to human biology. But it proved a terrifying, undeniable scientific concept. A virus can survive the deep freeze of an entire geological epoch, remain completely dormant for 30 millennia, and retain its full, terrifying ability to infect and kill a living host the moment it warms up. Think about what else lies buried in those exact same ancient layers of ice. These are the very same frozen grounds where ancient human species, Neanderthals, and Denisovans lived, hunted, and died in massive numbers. They suffered from ancient strains of deadly diseases that modern humans have absolutely zero genetic immunity against, diseases that have been wiped off the face of the earth for thousands of years, leaving our immune systems completely unprepared. We have already seen a small, terrifying preview of what this scenario looks like in the real world. In 2016, a bizarre, sudden, and deadly outbreak struck a remote nomadic community located deep within the Arctic Circle. Dozens of people were suddenly hospitalized with severe symptoms, and a young boy tragically lost his life to a mysterious illness. After intense investigation, the culprit was identified as anthrax. But there had not been a single documented anthrax case or outbreak in that entire region for over 75 years. The disease was considered entirely eradicated from the area. Investigators eventually traced the source of the deadly infection back to a collapsing, melting hillside of permafrost. As the unusually warm summer ice melted away, it exposed the ancient carcass of a reindeer that had died of anthrax all the way back in 1941. When the carcass thawed out in the open air, the dormant, highly resilient anthrax spores woke up, entered the local water supply, and rapidly infected the modern grazing herds that the nomadic people relied on for survival. If a single, 70-year-old animal carcass can thaw out and cause a modern public health crisis, what happens when massive, industrial mining operations, oil drilling, and global warming cut deep into ice layers that are 50,000 or 100,000 years old? We aren't just opening up a beautiful scientific archive of our planet's history. We are systematically opening Pandora's box, releasing ancient biological forces that have been locked away for a reason. The melting of our planet's frozen wilds is undeniably a double-edged sword. On one hand, it represents a slow-moving, catastrophic ecological disaster that threatens the baseline stability of our modern climate and coastal cities. Yet, at the exact same time, it is providing humanity with an unprecedented, breathtaking, and miraculous window into our own deep past. Every single summer, as the polar ice sheets retreat and the tundra turns to mud, a brand new, unread chapter of Earth's history is written in the dirt. We are discovering the beautifully crafted hunting tools of ancient human civilizations, the perfectly preserved bodies of prehistoric wolves that still look ready to snarl, and the exact genetic blueprints of magnificent creatures we long thought were erased from existence forever. We are currently standing at a monumental crossroads in human history. We can choose to look at these emerging discoveries as mere anomalies, strange, interesting artifacts of a forgotten world that once was. Or, we can recognize them for what they truly are, a profound warning and a shifting window of time. The Ice Age is no longer just a static collection of dry, white fossils hidden away in the dark, dusty corners of a university museum. It is dynamic. It is real. It is full of biological material, and it is waking up right before our eyes. The only question left for us to answer is a simple one. Is modern humanity truly ready for what comes next when the ice completely disappears?